The Common Ground World competition happening on December 17, 2024 will feature the Eggnog meta. The craft requirements for Eggnog are 2 eggs, 5 milk, 1 vanilla beans, 1 white rum, and 1 honey. It is crafted in the brewery with the craft time of 30 seconds and stored in the storehouse. For this competition, Eggnog will give 40,000 stars for each one sold. The trade time for this competition is 20 seconds with a 1 gasoline cost per trade. The starting layout provided for this competition is a plains biome facing north with 2 rivers on the east and west side and a mountain on the south side. You start with several tree farms next to the river on the east, 2 milk barns to the west, 2 rancher houses, and a storehouse to store milk in. The cash boost for this competition is milk from 4,000 to 12,000. The rewards for this competition are the standard Gala rewards for reaching the top 1,200 placements in the leaderboard by the time the competition ends. Rewards are usually distributed directly to your account within 5 days. This is the Eggnog design that I have created. It is doing about 51 Eggnog per hour. I'm going to scroll through the production monitor so you can see the production rates of everything, and I will further explain how to improve this design later in the video. I'm first going to break down the crafting process of everything going on. I'll begin by explaining flour and yeast production. There are 9 logger houses in charge of picking up wood from the 16 tree farms, 8 of which are on the east side, the other 8 are on the west side. The wood on the west side is intended to go to the animals and the windmills, and the wood on the east side is intended to go to the lumber mills. There are 4 tractors in charge of picking up all of the crops. We'll start with the wheat fields. There are 2 wheat fields on the north over here. One is on a yellow craft timer because it's being impacted by 1 shade from the farm tractor. This is done on purpose in order to balance the amount of wheat that is being produced, since we only need a specific amount of flour and yeast to be produced to reach the current goal of 51 eggnog per hour, and this helps accomplish that. So the wheat will get stored in the silo. There are 2 silos, and the wheat should only be getting stored on the north silo right here. There are 8 windmills crafting flour, all of which are on a red craft timer, and there are 2 bakeries crafting yeast right here. They have the passive water drum from the nearby water pump, and they only need to pick up 2 flour per yeast. The flour and the yeast will get stored in the storehouse, of which there are 3 of them, but of course they will store it in the closest storehouse, which should be this one. Now we'll move on to milk and egg production, all of which is taking place on the west side. I have 3 ATVs, 17 milk barns, 2 chicken coops, and a total of 48 meadows for them to feed upon. All of the milk barns and chicken coops are facing the meadows directly. That way they can actually get to them faster and they won't have to go around if they were facing the road, as this would be less efficient. So make sure that you have all of them facing the meadows. Now I'm going to break down white rum production. You may recall a few weeks ago that white rum was introduced as its own meta, but now it's one of the items required for eggnog. So there are 2 lumber mills making lumber. This allows us to have enough lumber for both iron and honey, which are required for eggnog. I do have 1 water facility on the northeast corner over here, and that stores water drums in either one of these warehouses. The reason it's so far away is to limit the amount of water drums that are produced. As you can see, I'm getting 55 water drums per hour, and that means I will only ever get 55 iron per hour. This way I'm not wasting too much lumber. I am overproducing lumber in this case, so it really doesn't matter, but I just wanted to do it this way. You really could have the water facility closer if you wanted to, as long as it also has the 3 passive water that it needs, but I decided to do it that way to balance the amount of water drums that are being produced. So there are 2 warehouses to store the water drums, iron, oak barrels, clay lumps, all that stuff in. I have only 1 iron mine, which does have the passive energy it needs from the nearby power plant. Of course, the iron mine is making iron, and I have 6 6 oak trees for the loggers to collect oak wood from and take it to the 2 lumber mills making oak barrels. And then I have 4 sugarcane fields, so the tractors can pick up sugarcane, take it to either of the silos. I believe they could take it to both silos, but primarily they should be taking it to the silo on the south side. And I have 7 breweries in charge of making white rum, which are the ones closer to the crops. They do have to pick up 10 sugarcane, so that's a lot of trips to the silos. That's why you want them close to the silos, as close as possible. And they do have the 2 passive water drums that they need from all of the nearby water pumps. That is why there are so many water pumps close to them. Now for honey production, this will use a nuclear power. Nuclear power is very expensive. It costs 10 million if you don't have any NFTs to reduce the build cost. But the reason it is used is to provide passive energy to pottery shops without casting dirty on them, which will allow them to craft ceramic bowls on a green craft timer. So in addition to the 3 pottery shops crafting ceramic bowls, which have the passive energy and passive water drums that they need, you also need 1 clay field to produce the clay lump required to craft ceramic bowl. The clay lumps are picked up directly from the pottery shop workers, but they will more than likely be picked up by the forklift, taken to the warehouse that's all the way over here or over here, and then the worker will have to go to the warehouse. So it is not that efficient for the workers to go all the way to the warehouse to pick up the clay lumps, but it still ends up making 51 ceramic bowls per hour, which works for the current production rate. Then I have 2 beekeepers on the southeast corner over here. This is basically the honey setup. I have 2 beehives crafting honey, and I have 3 meadows for them to get the nectar from, and I have 1 pantry to store the honey in. And finally for eggnog, we've explained everything with the exception of vanilla beans. So tractors are also in charge of picking up vanilla beans from the 6 vanilla bean fields. These do not care about shade. However, 2 of them are on a yellow craft timer because there is 1 dirty being cast by this refinery all the way over here, but that's fine. It's like essentially there's 5 vanilla beans on a green craft timer. You can think of it that way. And of course that does overproduce vanilla beans, so you will have no issue with those. And there are 3 breweries making eggnog. 2 are on the south side closest to the storehouse that stores all the eggs and some of the milk, and there's 1 more brewery crafting eggnog on the north, close to the storehouse that stores only milk. For the gasoline setup, I have the water pumps, the 2 power plants, the refinery in between them crafting gasoline, and the refinery to the side crafting petroleum. I am using 1 forklift to primarily pick up the crude oil from the oil pumps, take them to the fuel storage, which is where petroleum and gasoline also get stored in. And for the trade setup, I have 1 trade depot on the north side over here. There are 4 empty spots in this design, as you can see. 3 empty spots right here and 1 over here, but there's not much you can do here without further casting more shade on the wheat fields. But these 3 spots can be used for important buildings to further improve the production rate of this design. Here's what the auto trade looks like. Basically, you want to have all the relevant items on here with a trade quantity of 10. I do have some of them with a trade quantity of 15, such as the vanilla beans, the wheat, which I never have wheat overproducing since all of it gets used to make flour and then yeast. And I also have sugarcane on here with 15, which does overproduce in this case. I do have oak wood at 20, which thankfully does not overproduce, but I do recommend putting oak wood on here just in case it jams the lumber mill. If you don't have enough space to put lumber in the lumber mill, your build will fail because you need lumber to craft iron as well as honey. You may also want to put regular wood here just in case you're overproducing it, which may happen if you have too many tree farms or not enough lumber mills making lumber. Here's what the build looks like on the visualizer. Total cost is about 23.7 million. Wages are 18,920 per minute. You will have no issue paying wages once you are finished with the build. This build is pretty expensive due to the nuclear power as well as the breweries, but it is efficient and it is a competitive design in my opinion. You can find the file for this visualizer on my Discord server, and an invite link to my Discord is in the description. Now I'm going to talk about chickens as well as potential things you could do to increase the production rate of this design. So let's start with the chickens. There has been an update this past weekend that increased the feed requirement to craft eggs from 3 to 4. This wasn't explained in any announcements, and it was just revealed by Reant, one of the main team members for Common Ground World, that this change was not intended and will be reverted back to a 3 feed requirement. So with that in mind, that should increase the egg production rates of this design ever so slightly. It may also reduce the milk requirement by a little bit, so do keep that in mind, but I don't expect the actual eggnog production rates of this design to be affected by this change. There is also another thing to note about chicken coops at the very moment. If you do have a wheat stand and you are crafting feed from feed mills, they will feed directly from the feed mills instead of the trough, which I'm not exactly sure if that is intended or if that will be fixed, but that bug or feature, whatever you may call it, has been noticed by the community. I just wanted to point it out. I'm not exactly sure if that will be fixed. I don't think it's intended, and that only works with chickens at the moment. It does not work with cows or sheep. And now I'll explain what you could do to further improve the production rates, assuming that milk and eggs won't be an issue. If you do need to make more eggs, you could make another chicken coop right here on a red or on a yellow craft timer with the too dirty, but I don't suspect you will need to do that. And if for some reason you need to make more milk, you could replace some of these tree farms with meadows. You may run into issues when like not enough wood here or not enough wood for the lumber, but that really just depends. Another thing you could do to further improve the production rate is by adding a 4th pottery shop crafting ceramic bowls. You could just move this brewery to the back over here. If you do add a pottery shop right here, it will be negatively impacted by this oil pump, but that might actually be okay. You might still make enough ceramic bowls, which will be required to make more honey. However, you might actually also need a 3rd beehive to make more honey, which means you could build it here. You could move this farm tractor somewhere else. Like I said, there is space right here after all, but you may also need a 4th clover field if that's the case. I'm not exactly sure. That does require more testing, but that is one of the things that is stopping it from potentially making 54 eggnog per hour. Another thing is the white rum. You might need another brewery, so in addition to moving this one over here, you could build yet another one. You do have the sugarcane and even the oak barrels to potentially reach up to 54 per hour. And the last thing is the yeast. It is barely producing enough wheat to make the 103 flour to make the 51 yeast, as you can see. So you could move this wheat field so it can be on a green craft timer. Like, you don't really need this road. You could just put the wheat field here, then you can have 2 green timer wheat fields. You may be overproducing wheat, and then you would probably need another windmill to craft flour. I don't expect you to need another bakery. I'm pretty sure it will be fine with just 2 bakeries, but there we go. I pretty much just mentioned all the potential changes you could make to further improve the eggnog production rate to 54, but I'll let you figure out exactly if you want to do that and how to do that, or if it even works. It may require some testing, but I figured I'd mention it just in case you were interested in further improving this. And if you want to go beyond this with this specific design, I'm not sure if you can unless you also implement NFTs to further help you improve the production rates. But that's all the advice I have, so hopefully this build showcase is able to help you create or improve your eggnog design for this upcoming competition. If you found this helpful or informative, please leave a like, leave a comment, consider subscribing if you haven't done so. If you want to help support the channel, there are links in the description on how to do so, and as always, I appreciate your support and thank you for watching.